Chapter 16. Eckhart and Sides rolled through the university district in silence. Streetlights spilled across the hood of the SUV, glinting off passing storefront windows. A few late-night stragglers crossed campus lawns, their voices faint through the rolled-up glass. Sides kept his eyes forward. He hadn't mentioned the figure wrapped in paper, the same figure now tucked safely in his jacket pocket at home. What good would it do? Eckhart would only meet the story with skepticism, maybe outright scorn. Eckhart had never admitted to believing in anything supernatural. More than once, Sides had wondered if that disbelief had hindered him in his own journey to sobriety. The 12-step program had worked eventually, but miracles were never part of Eckhart's vocabulary. He believed in law, in evidence, in experts. If the supernatural existed, he reasoned, the courts would have no jurisdiction over it, so it didn't matter. And when it came to those who claimed otherwise, Eckhart's contempt was absolute. Nothing angered him more than people who acted as if their title or calling placed them beyond man's law. Time and again, headlines told the same story. High-ranking clergy smuggled to foreign sanctuaries tucked beyond the reach of the Department of Justice. To Eckhart, that wasn't faith. It was blasphemy. Homegrown religious institutions rarely had that luxury. There was no safe haven to run to, no way to dodge accountability. That, at least, was some comfort in Eckhart's world, a world where only what could be proven truly counted. Sides knew better than to bring up the void of pink fog. To Eckhart, it would be nothing more than a bad dream, a side effect of head trauma or stress-induced hallucination. Bringing it up would only provoke him. After all, their talks on faith, evidence, science, and the supernatural had a way of spiraling. No matter how close they were, those conversations always veered into personal territory, both men slipping into cheap shots and one-upping each other with so-called truth bombs. It never ended well. It never changed anything. Sides kept quiet. Part of the silence came from knowing where he stood, on the opposite end of Eckhart's spectrum. To Sides, faith and science weren't mutually exclusive. They were equally real, equally binding. He believed in right and wrong, with no patience for gray areas that others clung to. That conviction had shaped his past as an officer of the law and his present work as well. Human nature, he believed, was vicious at its core. Hobbes had it right. Man must be restrained, or he would devour himself. Law enforcement wasn't just about arresting criminals after the damage was done. It was about fighting crime, actively, relentlessly. Anything less felt like surrender. Yet Sides found it strange, almost ironic, that he and Eckhart stood on opposite ends of the spectrum when it came to faith and science, yet both had forsaken the purity of their convictions. Sides knew all the familiar shortcuts from his years in law enforcement, and in private investigative work, those shortcuts multiplied. They weren't illegal, not exactly, but they skirted the edges, methods designed to sidestep the legal process entirely. More often than not, it was the looming threat of humiliation, not a court's gavel, that brought people to heel. Over the past year, he and Eckhart had leaned on those tactics more and more. It wasn't a choice they made consciously. It was a slow drift, the kind that creeps in over time until one day you realize there's no going back. Still, Sides knew the conversation about the pink fog was inevitable. The real question was when. When would Eckhart be open to hearing it? When would he take it seriously instead of dismissing it as a dream or stress-induced vision? If the case fell apart, Sides would keep the secret forever. But another possibility gnawed at him. Dr. Ford. Maybe the doctor could offer insight, or maybe it would backfire. Maybe the figure was dangerous, and Sides alone had survived for a reason. He couldn't know, and the thought lingered like a shadow in the back of his mind. As Eckhart turned into the neighborhood near the compound, Sides' thoughts churned. They were behind. There was no denying that, but he wasn't convinced anyone else was truly ahead. Height was the key. But where was he? Neither man had contacts inside Weber Station. That place was a fortress. Before they left, Eckhart had scoured the jail's database. No one named Haidt had been booked or held since the day they watched him taken away. There were no public records of the interviews either. Height had to be out by now. Even a hound like Detective Weber couldn't stretch an interrogation past 48 hours. Where would he go? Sides wondered. Where are you going? You were supposed to take a right, Sides said, breaking the silence. I've got an idea, Eckhart replied. Sides watched as they rolled past the compound street. Eckhart took the next right onto an adjacent avenue, following it to a stop sign. The SUV hummed steadily, tires whispering over the immaculate pavement. Sides let his eyes wander. The homes here looked like something out of a romantic comedy, big and warm, yet deliberate in their charm. Wide porches, trimmed hedges, front yards glowing softly under porch lights. Each house was distinct enough to feel personal, but together they formed a picture of perfection. These were the Hollywood homes, Sides thought, inhabited by the city's intellectual elite, professors, their polished spouses, and well-insulated children, kids bound for private academies far from the realities of the city's rougher streets. One day, those same children would step seamlessly into their parents' roles, here or elsewhere, and the cycle would roll on. Sides exhaled slowly, his attention returning to the windshield. All right, he said, glancing at Eckhart. What's this idea of yours? Eckhart stopped at the end of the street, casually lifting a hand to wave at the driver of another luxury SUV as it rolled past. Then he took a right, another right, and circled back, approaching the compound from the opposite direction. He eased the car forward, engine low and steady, until he pulled to the curb several houses short of the compound. From this angle, they had a clear view into the front yard. A police cruiser sat parked along the roadside. Beside it, an officer spoke quietly with a man in a white clerical suit. The man's face was a wreck, one eye swollen black, a neck brace jutting stiffly from his collar, his left arm cradled in a cast across his chest. They couldn't hear a word, but the exchange told its own story. The officer's hands lifted in a helpless shrug, shoulders rising as if to say, I don't know. The clergyman's mouth moved quickly, frustration building. Then, after some back and forth, the officer pressed his palms together in a brief prayer-like gesture, speaking with a softness that seemed to sting. The man in the neck brace turned away sharply, raising a hand to shield his face. For a moment, there was only stillness between them. Then he composed himself, turned back, and the officer produced an electronic tablet, miming a signature with his finger. Eckhart and Sides watched in silence, the hum of their own engine filling the car. Whatever was happening, it was important enough to unfold under police eyes, in plain view of the compound. The man in the neck brace scrawled something on the officer's electronic device. The officer studied the signature, tapped through a few screens, then angled the display back toward the injured man. Whatever he showed earned a quick nod. The officer shifted his weight, one hand resting on his hip, and spoke at length, point by point, calm but deliberate. The man nodded along, never breaking eye contact. When the explanation finished, the officer tucked the device into his pocket and extended a hand. They shook firmly. The clergyman turned back toward the compound, disappearing behind the hedges and out of sight. The officer strode briskly to his cruiser, climbed in and pulled away, tires whispering against the quiet street. Sides and Eckhart sat in silence, watching until the patrol car's taillights vanished around the corner. I wonder what that was about, Sides muttered. No idea, Eckhart said, eyes still fixed on the compound. I wonder what the hell happened to that guy's neck. You think they're beating each other in there? Sides asked. Shut up, Richard. I'm serious, Sides said, leaning back in his seat. Some cultures nearly kill themselves for ritual purposes. It's called self-flagellation. I saw this video once. Muslims in Iran, guys whipping themselves until they bleed. One guy went too far, cut his back open with a sword. People had to rush in and hold the wound closed with their bare hands. Eckhart's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The car stayed idling in the shadows as both men stared at the darkened compound, the air heavy with more questions than answers. Look, Eckhart cut in, his voice sharp enough to make Sides snap his attention back to the compound. The man in the neck brace had reappeared. He stood just beyond the porch, speaking intently to a young woman with a backpack slung over one shoulder. She couldn't have been more than 19. Impatience radiated from her, one foot tapping, her gaze drifting toward the street as though somewhere else urgently needed her. The injured man gestured with his one free arm in wide, frantic motions, chopping the air as he spoke. His face was raw, red and swollen from tears, and his voice, though inaudible from the SUV, carried a visible weight. He turned away briefly, shoulders heaving, then spun back toward the door, continuing to speak as he disappeared inside. The girl kept nodding, her head bobbing as if to agree or simply to placate him. Then she pivoted on her heel and started down the street, stride quick, eyes forward. "She's probably going to class," Eckhart said, already twisting the key. The engine rumbled to life. "I've got an idea." Sides didn't need to ask. He held steady as Eckhart backed smoothly into the nearest driveway, shifted into drive, and rolled forward. At the stop sign, Eckhart took a left, then purposely overshot the distance the girl could reasonably have covered in the few seconds since she'd left the compound. He parked along a quiet side street lined with evenly spaced trees. The vehicle idled as he popped open the glove box and started rifling through folded papers and old receipts. "What are you looking for?" Sides asked, though he was already pretty sure of the answer. "One of those flyers we pulled from Alfonso's house," Eckhart said, shuffling through the clutter. "I'm sure I left a few in here." A grin crept across Sides' face. "Oh, I get it. Get out of the car and follow my lead," Eckhart said, tucking the pamphlet between his fingers. The two stepped out of the SUV and straightened their jackets, smoothing their clothes as they moved. Side by side, they walked to the end of the quiet street and turned left. Ahead, the young woman strolled toward them, unhurried. She wore a fitted long-sleeve shirt and black leggings tucked into heavy combat boots, her brunette hair knotted neatly in a bun. Her backpack sat snug on one shoulder, her free hand swinging with casual rhythm. There was a focus to her gait, a friendly but purposeful demeanor, as if she knew exactly where she was headed in life and had no time for distractions. She barely glanced up as they closed the distance. "Hello," Eckhart said, his tone warm and professional, both hands clasping the folded pamphlet. "Hello," she replied, slowing to a stop, her eyes flicking between the two men. I'm Dr. Eckhart, and this is Dr. Sides," he said smoothly. "We're with the university's research department. We were given this flyer." He extended the pamphlet toward her. She accepted it without hesitation, her fingers brushing the edge as she unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the contents, lines about the adherents, their outreach programs, and contact details. Her expression was unreadable, a quick study. Then she closed it and offered it back. "So, this is an older tract we used to hand out on campus," the young woman said, thumbing through the pamphlet, "before we got the cards with scannable QR codes." "Oh," Eckhart said, feigning surprise. "Yeah." She folded the pamphlet, glancing up at him. "Which research department?" "I'm sorry?" Eckhart blinked. "You said you're with the research department," she repeated, steady and curious. "Which one?" "Oh." Eckhart hesitated, eyes flicking toward Sides for backup. "Anthropology," Sides answered smoothly, not missing a beat. "Ah," she nodded slowly. "Well, they'll talk to you. Just probably not today." "Oh, that's too bad. Why not today?" Eckhart asked, his tone light but edged with genuine interest. "They've been having a lot of problems over there." Her voice softened, thoughtful. "Truth be told, I'm pretty on the fence about the whole thing." She brushed past them, setting back into her pace toward the university. "You don't mind, do you? I can't be late again." "Not at all," Eckhart said, matching her stride. "What sort of problems?" She gave a small shrug, eyes still forward. "I don't really know, to be honest. I just help out with the garden sometimes in the food kitchen. I like helping people, but they push their beliefs on you. Hard. It's probably not for me anyway. I don't really believe in God." "I see," Eckhart said quietly, studying her as they walked. "Anyway," the young woman went on, "one of the priests apparently went crazy and got himself arrested. We're not sure why, but they went to pick him up last night, and they all got hit by a drunk driver." "What?" Eckhart blurted, too loud, too sharp. The young woman stopped mid-stride, startled by his outburst. She gave him a strange, awkward look, like he'd just shouted in a library, then shook her head and kept walking toward the university. "Yeah, I don't know," she said over her shoulder. "He took off, though, the priest, not the driver." "Took off?" Sides asked, his tone cautious. "Yeah, no idea, dude," she replied with a shrug. "So, "Who's the guy in the neck brace?" Eckhart pressed. Sides shot him a quick disapproving glance. "Easy, don't spook her," but Eckhart didn't back off. "You've seen him?" The young woman stopped again, turning toward them with a brief smile, almost incredulous. Then she faced the university again, shaking her head as if she couldn't believe she was even talking about this. "I don't know his name," she said, "but he's a real jerk. Honestly, though, I feel bad for him. His friend, some other priest from California, is in a coma right now. The police came, and he had to sign something. I guess his friend, the one in the coma, was driving, and he had to sign something so the cops could process his blood. Apparently, they can't check for a DUI when you're unconscious. Who knew?" "So what about the other guy? The one you said got away?" Sides asked. "Oh, him." She brightened a little, eyes flicking up as she walked. "Yeah, he was pretty cool, actually. His name's Gerald. Gerald Height. But back at the house, you were supposed to call him Father Height. Or Summer Wind." She smirked. "I liked him. Kind of nerdy, but in a cute way. He was bought in, though. I mean, really bought in. He had some weird ideas, too. Outdated ones, if you ask me. He was against drugs, alcohol, smoking, all that. I like all that stuff. Doesn't seem like a problem to me. He also thought marriage was only between a man and a woman. I just can't get down with that. Guess he was heteronormative." "He was a priest there, right?" Eckhart asked. "Yeah," she said with a little shrug. "Though he didn't do much. He led the morning banishment ritual. It's this weird thing where everyone meditates and asks evil spirits to leave you alone." She laughed lightly. "I don't really believe in it, but the meditation part was cool. I just hated the talks afterward, and it starts at like 6 a.m. A girl's got to get her rest, right?" "Absolutely," Eckhart said, playing along. "So, what do you think happened to Height?" She narrowed her eyes a little, suddenly wary. "Say, you two aren't with the school paper, are you?" "No, absolutely not," Eckhart replied quickly, shooting Sides a sidelong look. The young woman laughed, waving off her own suspicion. "It's not like I care anyway, I'm just saying. They'll never talk to you if you're a journalist. I don't think they like journalists." "Really?" Sides asked, leaning in slightly. "Oh yeah," she said, shaking her head. "Biggest red flag you can wave in front of them." "Yeah, they're kind of secretive that way," she said, slipping her phone from her pocket to check the time. "They've had bad experiences with journalists before. I get it. Most people just want to dig up dirt. But honestly, who cares what they believe? They're helping people. There's a lot of folks in this town crushed by late-stage capitalism. They need help." She glanced at her screen and let out a sharp breath. "I'm going to be late again. Look, I'm sorry, but I've got to run." Eckhart and Sides watched as her pace quickened. Her brisk walk became a light jog, the backpack bouncing against her narrow frame, combat boots clanking rhythmically on the sidewalk. She paused long enough to swing the second strap over her shoulder, giggled to herself, then picked up speed again. She turned mid-stride, waving with a playful smirk. "Good luck," she called out. "Wait!" Eckhart shouted. "You never answered. Where do you think Gerald Height is?" "I don't know," she yelled back, still moving. Then she suddenly stopped, pivoted to face them, and cupped her hands around her mouth. "He's got family here somewhere in town. That's probably where I'd start." The two men locked eyes. She was right. Adherent clerics were often discouraged from contacting their families, classic isolation tactics, a way to keep members under control. But now they had a lead. They exchanged a silent nod, both knowing their next move. "Hey, journos!" the young woman called out one last time. She raised both middle fingers high, laughing as she turned and broke into a faster jog. Her laughter carried down the street until it faded into the distance, leaving the two men standing in stunned silence. Eckhart let out a slow breath. Sides shook his head, still processing. Together, without a word, they turned and headed back toward the SUV, minds already turning over how to track down Gerald Height's family.